Okay, so welcome everybody to this evening's webinar. My name is William Harmon, National League Football Development Officer, remit for Coach Education, and I'm joined by our guest this evening, Sarah Wall. Sarah is an All-Ireland winner with the Meath Senior Footballers. So it's great to have you tonight, Sarah. Sarah, would you like to say hello to everybody?
Hi, looking forward to the webinar. Should be interesting, hopefully.
Should be interesting, Sarah. I suppose, you're actually coming back from injury at the moment. You suffered an injury there recently. If you want to explain that before we start.
Yeah, so I'm just reintegrating into the county panel now, last week and a half, really. I suffered an ACL injury last December, so just back now. So looking forward to getting back into things, really.
Fantastic. So really looking forward to hearing all your experience and what helped you to get to where you are now. And it's great, Sarah, that you're actually back on the pitch as well. So that's great to see. Looking forward to seeing you on the pitch. Okay, so tonight's topic is catering for the injured player. It is what it says in the tin, and we'll try and keep it as simplistic as possible as we go along. And please, as I said, use the chat function if you'd like to ask any questions as we go along. So this is just one of many of our webinar series this spring. We've webinars coming up looking at the forward play, how to conduct analysis of a game, counteracting opposition tactics and systems of play, improving retention of the ball, and how to mind yourself as a coach during the season, which is vitally important. So loads of webinars coming up. You can log on to leadys.ie/learn/upcoming-webinars and just register as normal for these webinars. They're all available on our LGFA YouTube channel to view afterwards. So hopefully we can see you join us on those nights. So by the end of the webinar, what are we hoping to achieve? By the end of it, we're hoping that you'll recognize the significance of a player getting injured. So that's significance for that happening. Identify the role of you, the coach, in the rehabilitation process, and apply some simple strategies or techniques to ensure that, like Sarah, remains connected with the group. And that's what we're trying to achieve at all times. So let's set the scene with the body and the mind. And I'm sure you're all here as coaches, and you're thinking, you're on the sideline and a player gets injured. What goes through your mind at that time? And you're probably going, what area of the body did the player get injured in? I wonder how we're going to treat that. I wonder how long will the player be out for? These are the things that go through our initial thoughts as coaches. And it's sort of a bit of a narrow focus on the physical aspect of the injured player. But we forget about the psychosocial or the emotional aspect that comes with it, and the mind, and the impact it has on the injured player. Even like Sarah would be speaking in 2 seconds, in order to that long-term injury. So players just want to play. They train to play. And when they're not playing, it's like a shock to the system, whereby, they're now entering an unknown journey. Now, the physio will help them. They'll let them know what the injury is, what to do, and when to return to play. But are they really prepared for the psychosocial element of it and the emotional element of it? And that's the question I'd ask. Are they ready for that journey in order to try and get back to the pitch? So what is our role as coaches? Is to help them understand what to expect, what are the potential challenges, and how can we help them overcome that? Sarah, does that make sense to you? And what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree with all that. I think from a player's perspective, that once you're injured and you kind of know yourself it's not good, you just go into panic mode. And then I think that's when the coach just needs to come in, literally give 30 seconds of their time, kind of just settle the player, and then get back to the game. Obviously, it happens really fast, but just the emotional side, and then kind of the panic in that few seconds, you just need to be relaxed, and the coach can come in and do that.
That's interesting, Sarah. So from a coach point of view, we're probably thinking of the physical aspect, but from a player's point of view, you're probably more the emotional side of it. So it's very interesting, the contrast of feelings at that point of time. Would we be right in saying that?
Yeah, I think it would just be a bag of mixed emotions, really. And obviously, you're asked if you're all right, and you're just still not sure on the pitch, and then it probably would be the physio who has to make the call to come off because no player wants to come off. But then that's when the coach just needs to be, you did your job, you can't do anything else, and then you have to move back onto the match, really.
That's interesting. You know, it's very interesting. Like, even the first learning point tonight, everyone, is that just to understand that there's two aspects to when a player gets injured. There's the physical aspect, but also what's going through their mind. How bad is this injury? How long am I going to be out for? When will I be back to the pitch again? And in particular, like, you know, when you suffer a long-term injury, as you know, it could be a knee injury or it could be an ankle injury, as you know, it could be out for a while. So the first thing we learned tonight as coaches is understand that there's another element to when a player gets injured. Okay, and we look at strategies later on to try and help us deal with those things. But what can we do as coaches? I suppose this is the thing in terms of, as I mentioned earlier on, when there's a disruption to a player's, you know, playing, it's a shock to the system. For some players, I'm sure, like you, Sarah, you know, sport is everything. You know, everything revolves around it. College, you know, work revolves around sport. So therefore, when that's suddenly taken away from them, it's a shock to the system. So there's kind of a sense of loss. And I'd like to get your thoughts in a few seconds, Sarah, in terms of that uncertainty. So, you know, that loss of identity. I'm a player today, I'm not a player tomorrow because I'm not training. That loss of what's my role as a player within a team environment. That loss of self-confidence, self-esteem, because I'm not involved, or, you know, while you're not feeling, you know, that you want to be where you want to be, you're not there. That sense of sense of belonging to a team environment. And that sense of that structure is now gone. You know, you've structured everything around this, and now all of a sudden it's taken away. But the point, I suppose, is us as coaching need to do is we can't ignore that. And we need to be aware of it. Sarah, what's your thoughts on that? Or is that all Ramesh?
No, I definitely have. I not suffered, but I experienced all those when last year really, and I suffered my injury during COVID. So it was kind of a good thing and a bad thing that, like, I wasn't missing much for the first few months, but then once they started getting going, it was quite lonely. So then I lost, like, I'd use football as a healthy coping mechanism, and then, like, with my self-esteem, I lost, like, my structure during the week. So I found it hard motivation wise to get the trainings in and then go to the gym, rather than knowing without a question you're out 3 times a week and you see the girls, whereas this is just kind of down to you at the end of the day. But definitely it's a sense of loss when you have a long-term injury and you're so focused in on football or any form of sport. And I think girls definitely suffer from that they have such good connections on a team that when you lose that, it is tough to kind of get back into it.
And that's,
or get any sense of it.
But what I'm learning tonight, and everybody, I hope you're all learning tonight, is you're now getting the mindset of a player when they're injured. I think I'm fascinated by this, Sarah. You know, listening to you, that I never probably looked at it at this angle. And so, as coaches, we need to understand how that injury affects the player. You see with Sarah, various emotions go through. It's normal for a player when they hear that it could be a long-term injury, or it could be over 4 or 5 weeks, to be sad or angry or frustrated. And I suppose our role as coaches is to help players accept, listen, you're injured, okay, that's done. Now let's look forward. You know, what do we need to do? What do we need to do to help you to get back to the field of play as soon as possible? So a lot of players, Sarah, would they struggle with accepting injury? What I'm other words say, oh, I'm not injured at all, I'll be back for next week. And in particular, if you're in the middle of a championship, you want to play in the next week. Is that a difficulty for players to accept? You're injured, you're going to be out for 2 weeks or a period of time.
Yeah, I definitely have seen a good bit of that. I've played with a good few stubborn players that it could just be a 2-week injury, or say a couple of weeks, and then they won't accept that. So then they further injure themselves and put themselves in a worse situation. Whereas if they just kind of taken that at the start, but it's tough in that when you're in that place yourself, that you don't want to accept that you could be playing your best football at that time, and then you could just getting your inch in, that you get in your position, and then that happens. So you don't want to look weak basically on the team for your coach. You don't want to be saying, I can't do this, I can't do that.
And that goes back to the next point, stay positive. Do you know what I mean? Like, to help the player stay positive, and I just think as coaches, we have a very important role there to say, look, this is the scenario, this is the situation. And we play a role in the welfare of the player and what's best for the player. Even though we'd love to have you, Sarah, next week. No. This is where you are. this is what needs to happen to get you where you need to be. And I think as coaches, we need to be sometimes show a bit of leadership there and maybe just, guide the player appropriately. You can help the players with goal setting and return to play. So we could say, right, you're going to be back in 4 weeks' time. Well, these are little goals you can be doing. You can be working if it's a lower body injury. You could be doing a lot of, it could be if you're in the gym doing athletic development. It could be working off a weaker side of the body with your hands, whatever it may be. You need to help them. So give them a little small bit goals because mini goals help. And you achieve that goal, you go to the next goal. So having little mini goals and have a set plan is handy. And then utilize that sport around them. That sport being parents and, their friends and the players. Would the sport network be important, Sarah, that the coach kind of interacts outside of just the player themselves? Would your coach have interacted with your fellow teammates, maybe your parents? Would that have applied to yourself?
Not more so my parents, just I think as we're a bit older, it's more so put onto you as a player to have that connection with your coach. But I was very lucky in the sense that I had a great club team and a great county team that immediately I'd be getting texts from all the girls, and then all my coaches would continuously text me. So it was nice to still have that connection with them, that they always made me feel so welcome to come back whenever suited me as a player, that it was down to me and when I felt easier to go back, whereas I was still kind of in the phase for a long time of not like acceptance, and I was angry that I got injured again. So it was nice to always know whenever I was ready to integrate back, even just to be part of the panel and stand at the sideline, I was always welcome there.
I actually tore my cruciate at the age of 19 as well, Sarah. I was out for a year, and I didn't go near training. The team actually totally disconnected.
Yeah.
And the actual connection between my teammates and my coaches was minimal. In terms of it was very isolated. I basically kind of just stood away from the whole thing. So I suppose we hit it later on about the importance of staying connected. And it's a very, very, it's a simple phone call. It's a simple text. Hinted really, and we don't underestimate the importance of that. So we'll hit that in a few minutes. We'll come back to that in a minute. Right. So let's look at 3 scenarios and we're done for tonight. And I suppose let's go back to, when a player gets injured, it's a significant part of their season. There's that, going back to your point, you said, Sarah, about that feeling disconnected. So, and the point I'm trying to make, if you as a coach go away tonight understanding the bigger picture of what happens, I suppose, from the mind and the physical point of view, I think you're going to handle these scenarios a lot better, hopefully. Okay, or maybe it's just informed what you're doing. You're doing very well. So we're going to go through a few scenarios and give you a few tips as coaches of what you could do. And we'll listen as well to Sarah and probably what your coaches have done as well to keep that connection. So we'll move on to the first one. So one of our players got injured in the game. So the player just got injured. What initial support can you provide the player? So Sarah, if I was to ask you, you've been injured in the game, what kind of support do you feel you should get at that initial phase? What's your thoughts?
I think just initially for the coach to just come up, kind of acknowledge the player, acknowledge their injury, and then for them to be set back with the subs and kind of get physio treatment. And then also probably afterwards, just be kind of told their options. Whereas you're in the place of such an unknown territory, if you haven't been there before, or have had a serious injury, that you're just kind of, you don't know what you're going to do. So it's still.
And when you mention options, Sarah, what do you mean by options? So what is that? Just where to go to next in terms of maybe logging your injury, or is that what do you mean by your options?
So like the injury fund, what your kind of key options for that are, and then what kind of physios are available to you, what you can get from the injury fund, what if surgery is involved or anything like that. Whereas I wasn't really aware of that. Luckily, I had my mom to kind of basically look after me for that situation. Whereas some girls or guys won't have that they'll have to go through that themselves. And I don't think a lot of players really know too much about it.
Yeah, I be a lot of players don't know about the injury fund until they get injured. So sometimes we don't worry about something until something happens. So we don't worry about the injury fund until something happens. But even for coaches here tonight, are you all aware of what the injury fund is and what are the benefits are? My colleague, Amy Coll, did a very good webinar recently. It's on the LGFA YouTube channel. It's a very good overview, very short, over 30 minutes, of what the injury field is. So I would advocate strongly you go and see that. So I think that's a very good point in pointing the player in the right direction and guiding him. So first of all, assign a person. So what I would do there, Sarah, is I'd assign a person and say, right, okay, if there's someone in my management team or someone in the club, I'm giving you this role to look after Sarah. So if there's any forms to be filled out, guide her in whatever direction she needs from a physio, I'd get someone to make sure that happens. To make sure it happens, because sometimes if these things aren't done in accordance, you might be covering your difference. So I think that's very, very important, and then linking with the player. I like the way you said inform of the support. So what support is available to you, and guide you to where. Because sometimes we have this perception, I suppose, Sarah, that we know where to go next.
Yeah.
We don't really, do we?
No.
We don't. All we do is play. We train to play. When we don't play, what happens next? So I think that idea of informing of the support that's required is very important, and show empathy. But you know what, we're okay. We'll get you right. And I think you did another good point about keep that communication up as well, Sarah. That's important too, I suppose.
Yeah, definitely.
And was your coach very, very active, proactive in that sense?
Definitely the county side that Paul probably would get into contact with me at least once a month, just literally asking, how are you? That was the simple question. And it was nice sometimes that I'd be good or I'd either be bad, but it'd be the same text that he was still asking. He was still interested in me as a player. He still made that extra form of communication to keep me in the loop, really.
I like that by your coach. How are you, Sarah?
Yeah.
How simple is that?
Yeah, because sometimes you don't even want to talk about football in those situations that you're not going to be back for a while.
And that phone call could be, I presume, around your college, or how things going, and it might even be about the injury at all, Sarah.
Yeah.
But the fact that kept up the communication, say how are things, or even a text, how are you getting on? And afterwards, I'm sure you felt good about those conversations.
Yeah, it was nice. The support was welcomed always, so you just still felt a part of everything.
Brilliant. Let's go to scenario 2, Sarah. One of our injured players informs you she sustained a medium to long-term injury, which will result in her being out for a number of weeks or even a season, respectively. How can we support that player? Now, this is more long-term, Sarah. Can you tell me how were you kept connected, or what strategies or techniques the coaches did for you to keep you connected?
I think definitely at the start of it, I personally just needed to take a step back because it was my second knee injury. So I was really frustrated at the start.
Okay.
That I was kind of like, why did this happen to me again? I thought I worked so hard to get back. So I think the coaches gave me the time I needed just to kind of process everything, and then want to go back and want to go to the gym and want to be a part of the team. And then say once the girls got to the final, actually, Paul just gave me a simple task of taking down what players got ticked. Okay. So something so simple, but it just made me straight away on the day not feel like I was kind of like hovering around anyone or kind of sitting there being like, oh, what do I do next? Really, I really appreciated that on the day, that I still felt so a part of the team. Just from a simple task,
yeah, but it's a simple task.
Yeah.
Come here to me. Can you just mark there in a sheet of paper who got ticked? And and you feel connected now. You feel you're playing a role. You're helping your teammates achieve their outcome, which is to perform well and win in the end of the day, win the All Ireland. So Sarah, it was because of you they won the All Ireland. Do you know what I mean? It was because of you. I like that. I like that, Sarah. And I suppose other things. So that's one. Give a role. But I would say ask the player too, Sarah. Ask the players, what would they like to contribute to the team? So, for example, it could be, do you know what, we're playing in opposition next week. Could you go and watch them for me and come back with your notes? So they're playing next week. Go on away. If you're in the club team, go down and watch the game and come back with a few notes. That could be one thing. Another thing could be assist with training. So we're training tonight, and Sarah, I want you now to help me with this drill and this drill. So you're getting them involved in the training process, and game planning. So maybe ask you, Joe, what you're the player's perspective here now, Sarah. Will you get the feedback from the players on what they think of the game plan? Do things like that help, do you think, Sarah? And I suppose the importance is you need to know your player too. Some players mightn't like doing that. So I suppose asking the player and engaging the player would be important.
Definitely whatever the player feels comfortable with, because I think I was asked that a lot, that whenever I felt okay to come back, and then once I did, the task kind of came in, and it was just literally simple ones like that. I can't say I did them too well now. I missed a good few ticks on them, but I was too busy watching the match. But it literally is just asking them, and then some players may not feel comfortable, but it's just still letting them know you want them to be involved.
Brilliant. And Joe, we're always looking for statisticians, stats at the sideline.
Yeah.
You have to pay big money for a statistician. No, let's get the player who's injured.
Yeah.
All you need is a piece of paper and a biro, and give them a bit of guidance, and they'll be able to do just as good a job. You know what I mean?
Exactly.
So
I had
hope that gives
an
you
iPad. Yeah, for
an
a few
iPad.
times.
Oh, you did an iPad. Okay.
for the kick out.
Sorry, yeah,
wasn't very good at that job either.
Sorry, you had an iPad. Now there's a different level on to it. But I think what we're learning here is that the importance of asking and involving the player, even asking what role would you like to play. Get them feel connected by giving them a role, like, on match day, like it could be stats or whatever it may be, or tick who's getting yellows, or it could be just make them feel like an athlete. So whatever injury they have, can they still be doing something that's applicable to developing them as a player that'll make them stronger when they come back? Like I say, it could be working on skills off both sides of the body. It might be working doing a bit of athletic development. So there's a lot of simple tasks there we could do to keep players connected, rather than just leaving them off and hopefully next time we see them, sure, you're back in again. Okay.
Yeah.
We'll go to the last scenario. I hope we're not going too fast for people. Okay, so one of your players has been given the all clear to come back and integrate back into the group and commence the field sessions. What are the key things the coach needs to consider? And I suppose this is important really now, because I'm a coach, and if I see a player come back from injury, I 9 times out of 10 think, right, they can do the full session, or maybe the player can feel they can do the full session. Sarah, tell me your thoughts on this from your perspective.
Yeah, well, I'm literally just back in that phase now myself, so just going through step by step, really. I'd probably think that as a player, you obviously want to go straight back in and hopefully be the exact same player that you were, but that's not really going to happen 9 times out of 10. That it takes a few training sessions or a couple of weeks, but I say for the coach to kind of just keep an eye on them. And I think me personally, as my own player, that like I'm stubborn on the pitch, that I don't want to come off, no way. So I don't think I would want to step out of training session. So that's kind of when your coach needs to come in and just be like, look, I can see you kind of pulling up here or there. Maybe just step out for just this one drill or something like that. Yeah. So I think it's communication between both player and coach, really.
Yeah, communication. And I suppose the first thing as a coach is recognizing is that the player won't come back the way they left. They're going to take time to reintegrate. It's going to take time to get the body back up to speed physically and maybe technically with their skills, maybe psychosocial in terms of interacting with the team. So I think that's the first thing as coaches need to recognize is when a player comes back from injury, don't expect them to do the same session as all the other players are doing for the last 4 or 5 weeks, because they haven't built up that tolerance. So it's important that, I suppose, we seek that advice, those coaches. So if you're going to see a physio, then I would seek advice to say, okay, well, what should Sarah be doing? So this physio will tell you guys, she should be doing X, Y, and Z. You make sure she does X, Y, and Z and leave her off then. She might go, no, I can continue on. No, you've done your bit now. Off you go, you're finished. And I think that's important for coaches to be able to recognize that, because players will want to continue on, Sarah.
Yeah, definitely. You don't want to go back and only do 2 drills or something when that's what you've been told by the physio, but then say you go back your first training session and you feel great that you want to keep going. And if you did, in that sense, that you could come home and just pay for it really the next few days. But I suppose it's down to the situation.
Yeah, I think if a player comes back, you wanted to keep them on the field. Remember that players trained to play. If they come back to training, you have to ease them into it so that they're there for the long term. Yeah, not the short term fix, it's the long term, I suppose.
Exactly, yeah.
Geez, we're flying. So, key take home points. So please, guys, in the chat function, if you have any question, ask them before we wrap it up this evening. But I suppose just key points for people listening tonight is that there's more to an injury than what you see. And I suppose our own thought process is what we see. But there's more going on, as excellently outlined from you, Sarah, in terms of what's the player thinking at that moment. Their journey is uncertain. Emotionally, they're thinking about, oh, how long am I out for? Oh my God, when am I going to be back playing? And therefore, the coach is thinking at a different level. So it's important that it's body and mind, that is more than just the physical. There's a psychological, and there's also the emotional side of things. Understand the path the players need to take and assist them overcoming those challenges. And when we say about keeping up, you're there to give them small goals, keep that connection. As I said, that's vitally important, because if you keep connected, then you're actually raising the expectations of players, because players go, geez, my coach was on to me today. Yeah, they're really, supporting me. I want to get back to, to get to the level I want to be. So it's really a motivational factor as well. So understand that, have empathy with the player, understand where they're at, and I suppose bigger picture, looking that there is more to just the physical aspect of it. And if you need advice, seek advice. If it's from a physio, if you're not up with the ins and outs of the injury, seek the proper advice. Even return to play, seek the proper advice and go by that, because that's the long-term game what you're trying to do. And just apply basic strategies to ensure a player stays connected. Like, ask the player what role they like to play. Give them a role, okay? I suppose making sure they're feeling like an athlete, given that they're working on areas that they can improve on outside of their injury. So there's things of that. I don't, Sarah, is there anything you'd like to say? What would be the key take-home point for you? And I'll just check the chat to see is there anybody talking before we leave it off.
Yeah,
so guys, in the chat function, let us know. Sorry, Sarah.
Sorry. I think overall it just comes down to communication at the end of the day. That's the bottom line. That's where you're going to get all your information and where you're going to make the most connection with your player.
And exactly. And I suppose what we also advocate tonight is the injury fund is there to support our players. You need to be aware of what it is. So if you even learned something tonight, go now onto the website, go onto that webinar that was done, very short webinar that was done. It's on the LGFA YouTube channel. Find out what it's about. Find out the procedures, what needs to be done in order to record an injury, because you need to get permission before you go on the various steps. Maybe you might identify someone in your group. That's what I do with my coaching team. I have someone specifically that if a player gets injured, your job is to make sure they're looked after, that the forms are filled out, that everything is done, that whatever it may be. So I actually have someone in my own coaching group looking after that specifically, because it's vitally important that we don't want to be coming back afterwards and asking questions.
No.
I'm just going to look at the chat to see is there anybody here. So Rosemary Brown, how are you, Rosemary? Hope you're well. Any suggestions for players returning to training post-COVID? We definitely got a few players that aren't at full strength post-COVID infection. It's not an injury as such, but it's hard to define it. Rosemary, that's an excellent point. And that's very similar to coming back from, I suppose, if you're coming back from inactivity for a long time. So if you're after pre-season, Rosemary, you're coming back from activity. So I would say is you've got to ease them into training. They're going to be, their first few sessions will be very light, a lot of technical ability stuff, very light, probably non-contact. And we have one or two webinars, Rosemary. One was done by Clean O'Connor. And we also have another webinar about, I suppose, what to do in the early stages of the season as well. So I'd ask you to give a look at that. It gives nice examples. But my advice to you at Rosemary is seek advice as well. So I wouldn't have the ins and outs of what needs to be done, but I would seek advice from someone that knows their stuff, that you inform you of a player coming back. What do you think I should do? So seek advice. And number two, don't expect them to get the level the players are there. And you need to recognize that they're going to be at a certain level and it's going to take time. And number three, like we spoke about tonight, inform the player that this is the process. This is okay. It's going to take time. And I suppose get the player to understand that this is just a part of the bigger picture. Sarah, what do you think? Is that good advice from Rosemary? Or do you think
I think that's perfect. Just from other players' experiences with COVID, I'm lucky enough not to have had it going back to football now, that it's really a personal, just down to the individual, that like some girls I've heard that they're fine going back, no problem whatsoever. And then others have real difficulty breathing, doing any sort of runs or anything like that.
Yes.
So I suppose it's literally just down to the person and how long it's going to take them. It's all down to the individual.
Exactly. And Rosemary, actually, we had a player in my own group had the same scenario. So that's what I did. I got the advice from key people who knew her, and also that person eased back into training until they felt comfortable to start raising their levels again. I think once you understand that, and get the players to understand that it's going to take a process, it's going to take time. I think you'll be okay, Rosemary. I think you'll be okay. But there's webinars there, hopefully, that'll help you get a more understanding of that as well. So look, on that note, we hope you enjoyed tonight. We wanted to keep it very simple. We hope we go back to our outcomes and we give you a few techniques and strategies. But at the end of the day, it's about that personal touch, I think, of the coach, and that I suppose player, coach, athlete relationship, and that connectivity, and understanding how the player, and that empathy that you're about the player to make them feel connected. I think that's vitally important and probably the biggest one. Let's just check the chat before we go. Thank you. No problem, Rosemary. So, Sarah, final, one or two words. Do you want to say anything before we leave?
I think we've covered it all there now. Don't think I can think of anything else.
Well, I just want to say thank you very much, Sarah.
Thanks for having me.
For sharing your experiences tonight. I think I learned an awful lot from listening to about this topic from the player's perspective as well. And hopefully now I'll take that on as a coach as well myself. I want to wish you the very best look over the coming weeks as well in your reintegration back into the sport. And we're really looking forward to seeing you on the field of play and watching the team play in the National League over the coming weeks as well. So Sarah Wall, thank you very much. To everybody else, thank you very much for your time. We're going to be back again in a few weeks' time with another webinar. I think we're looking at the forward movement. Please, you can register for that on the LGFA website. And you can avail of this webinar afterwards on the LGFA YouTube channel. You can share it with all your coaches and hopefully they'll take one or two things from it. If you have any feedback, please, we'd love to hear from you. And there's an evaluation form, or even you can email myself or even the development officer or development support at lgfa.ie. We'd love to hear your feedback as well. So on that note, thank you very much for your time. Good night.
Thanks.